Good evening. I'd like to call to order the February 2020 meeting of the Zoning Hearing Board. Our first item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. I invite you to join me. Thank you. Before we get to the appeals this evening, there is some annual board housekeeping that we need to take care of, namely the election of a chair and a vice chair of the board for 2020, the appointment of the board's solicitor, and the adoption of the board's rules and regulations, and we will commence with that first. First, I would ask members if they care to offer a motion or a nomination for someone to serve as chair of the board for 2020.
Make a motion that John Riley be elected chair of the board for 2020.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 All opposed? I will abstain, but I thank you. Next, we will ask for nominations to serve as vice chair of the board. Would anyone like to make a nomination?
Nominate George Nagel to be elected as vice chairman of the board for 2020.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? No. Vice chair for life,
For life.
George Nagel. Next, we need to appoint our solicitor for the year 2020, and I suppose I'm allowed to nominate folks as well. And Constantine Akadamitis has assisted us as interim solicitor, if you will, in conjunction with filling a vacancy that we had through the 2019 year. I think he's done a fine job, and I would like to nominate Constantine Akadamitis as solicitor for the Zoning Hearing Board for the year 2020. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? This is your chance, Gus. No. So we will have Gus with us as the board solicitor, and we thank him again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's been a pleasure.
And lastly, we will adopt the rules under which the Zoning Hearing Board operates. I do not have a printed copy of those rules with me this evening, but anyone that takes a look on the website at the zoning hearing application that is submitted by applicants when they bring matters before us, at the end of that application is a fairly lengthy set of rules and regulations that relate to how our board operates, and I would propose adopting those as our rules again for 2020. Is there a second for that the recommendation?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Seeing none, our rules and regulations are adopted. That takes care of the reorganization portion of this evening's meeting. Thank you for bearing through that. And now we will turn to our substantive matters for the evening. The first matter is appeal number 2904. The applicant Anthony and Gloria Mari, property located at 203 Church Street, request an extension of time for obtaining a permit under section 280-144 of the zoning code for an additional 6 months to August 24th, 2020. Mr. Murray?
Yes, sir.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Let's swear him in. Yep.
You do solemnly swear or affirm this testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
So help me.
And state your full name, please.
Anthony Murray, Anthony Vincent Murray.
Sorry to see you again, but nice to see you again as well.
Thank you. I said to the counselor, I says, I feel like I got family here. It's great. You know, a lot of great faces, friendly faces. I appreciate everything you guys are doing for me. And I hired Yerkes to do the sewer, the tie-in, and I'm just waiting.
Yep.
I'm in line. I guess I'm
And what brings you here is the moratorium
Right.
that is stopping new connections
Correct.
to go into the sewer system into which
Right.
Our township's sewage is fed. So,
Yeah.
folks,
He's paid for, so he's got it. He's fine. He's got his money. He's ready to go.
right. And ordinarily, when we grant variances, we will consider, a reasonable extension perhaps once. Second time, you really need to make a case. But this is, I think, your third time back. Is
No,
just a second?
no. This is
Fourth?
This is.
Oh, jeez. Sorry.
This has been, I think, Nick, 4 years, 5 years.
Yeah. I don't want to pencil you in for the August meeting, and we don't meet in August. So if there's, I would caution you that if you find yourself in the situation where you need the extension again, we do not typically meet in August. So you may want to think about trying to get on the July agenda if need be.
Appreciate
But,
that.
I'll entertain a motion to extend, to grant the extension.
Make a motion to grant the extension to August 24th, 2020 for property at 203 Church Street.
Second?
Second.
Motion.
Any discussion? Any public comment? Hearing none, we'll call the vote. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? There are none. You have your extension,
Thank you.
and
Thank you, gentlemen.
hopefully this is the last
Man.
one, but who knows?
Thank you.
Good luck to
Appreciate
you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks. Okay, next matter is Appeal 3054. The applicant, Michael and Susan Tague, property located at 520 Watch Hill Road and zoned R1 residential. The applicant seeks a variance from Section 280-15C of the zoning code in order to construct a one-story open porch and/or request a special exception from Section 280-101A2, if applicable or needed, to expand an existing non-conforming building. Good evening.
Hi, how are you?
Nora?
Swear you both that you will raise your right hand. You do solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
We did.
And state your names one at a time, please, and spell.
Hi, I'm Michael Tague. I'm the homeowner. It's Tague.
Okay, and so,
Rene Hoffman, Renehoffman, and I'm Mr. Tague's architect.
So why are we here?
So we are seeking relief from a front yard setback to build a front porch, an unenclosed front porch. There are a couple of additional considerations. I guess one is that we actually were here back in 2004 seeking the same kind of relief, and it was granted, but life got in the way, never got it built. We did ask for an extension, but I didn't know 14 years later whether that extension would still apply. So we're back here asking for permission again, and a slightly reduced footprint. The old design was wrapped around, and this is not wrapped around. But essentially, we're here for the relief of the front porch. We do have a couple of additional exhibits. One is a letter signed by our neighbors saying, "We love it, move forward, please." And then my architects also provided a color highlighted plot plan to show you the kind of where the existing porch was versus the, should I just pass it look at it?
Yeah, we're gonna need to mark exhibits on this file, so why don't we start by marking the application as A1? No, we don't need that. There is a list of exhibits, which I suppose we can just call A2. There is a summary description of the requested relief, which we will identify as A3. There is a copy of our appeal number, our order in appeal number 2628, which I believe Mr. Tague referred to earlier, that we will identify as A4. There's another narrative of improvements, which presumably describe the actual project, which we will call A5. And let's see, we have a witness list, which will be A6, copy of the deed, which is A7. There are, at least in our package right now, as was submitted at the time of application, 3 photographs, which we will call A8A, which is identified as the front elevation, A8B, which is the right elevation, and A8C as in Charlie, which is the left elevation. And then we've got 2 plans, which I assume one is existing conditions, the other is proposed.
One is the site plan and one is the architectural.
Okay. So the site plan, which is prepared by Momney and Associates, we will identify as A9. And the architectural plan, we will identify, well, we will identify it as A10. There's an A1 designation on it, but we're just going to ignore that. This is an architectural plan prepared by R.A. Hoffman Architects, Inc., and that's A10. And I believe it's, yeah, okay. So those are A10, and then there are 2 additional items?
2 additional items.
Yeah,
How many you have? You have copies?
I don't have, I do have copies. These are basically the neighbors' signatures. Do you need copies of that?
okay. A11 will be a letter signed by a number of neighbors. Yeah, if everybody wants to take a quick look at that.
These are copies?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then this is the color code hash mark layout that we're asking for.
Okay.
Give me that original back when you send these up.
This is A12, but what is it again? It's it's another,
It's just a color-coded site plan.
Makes it easier for you
the
to
site,
see.
it's a site plan with the area of proposed improvements indicated. I'm sorry. It's a
Correct.
site plan with the area of the improvements highlighted in red or,
This is actually the area of the existing porch.
Please speak up, sir.
yeah, there's also a mic there.
It's actually the area of the existing porch which presently encroaches on the front yard setback, and it's shown in a pink highlight.
Okay, you're identifying the
What's-
additional, or the existing encroachment.
Yeah,
I'm
what's
sorry,
there
the
now.
existing encroachment. Okay, thank you.
Correct.
Okay, I apologize for that housekeeping, but it's,
Sorry for all the exhibits.
no, that's okay.
Yeah, so basically the front porch runs about, 5.5 feet out right now. We're looking for it to go out approximately 10 feet. It's running partially down the length of the house. We'd like it to run the full length of the house. And that's what we're here for, asking for relief from the building setback requirement.
Okay, let's look at 812 for a second so that we can understand just what we're talking about. If we could put 812 under, or one of 812s under the camera so the folks at home can, okay. So the colored area there is the portion of the current porch which encroaches into the setback. Is that correct?
That's correct, the front yard
Okay.
setback.
And the crosshatched area that is beyond that colored area is the proposed porch,
Extension,
the extension.
correct.
All right. And can you speak a little bit about, first, why you want to do this project, and then perhaps talk about what is perhaps unique to the property that causes you to have to go further into the setback?
Well, the current porch has been designed at a different time and place, and so it's really not very usable. It's only about 5 feet deep. So being able to, furnish it and use it is a little bit restrictive. I'm not sure. The porch was original to the house, so
And when was the house constructed?
I'm going to estimate about 65 or 66. We've been in it since about 2003, if I'm not mistaken. The porch, as I'm told, when we bought it, was original to the house. And so it's really not usable. So both from a functional standpoint as well as an aesthetic standpoint, there's been significant improvements on, it's a cul-de-sac street, and the houses to our left and to our right have been improved dramatically. And, I'm not looking to build a monstrosity, just improve my front porch to keep the aesthetics of the neighborhood up. But also, more than that, is be able to use the front porch on a cul-de-sac. Kids playing in the cul-de-sac it's common in our neighborhood, so it adds to the charm and character in that regard as well.
Are there perhaps photographs included in the exhibits that could give the board a sense of the property as it exists, and perhaps the context of the other surrounding properties?
You can't see it from the pictures that I provided. Here's a, well, you can see it in the overhead maybe too. There's this the other way.
We can see that, but I'm not sure that that's included in the 3 photographs. It's not, because it's got the mailbox in it.
So if it makes a difference, you already mentioned it's our R1 zone, so each property is on an acre on the cul-de-sac, and quite honestly, there's 2 properties next to me that are flag lots, so there's 2 driveways to the left of my property, to the left of that picture. There are 2 driveways that run back to 2 flag lots. So there's quite a bit of room between us and our neighbor to the left, and the neighbor to the right. Again, it's an acre lot, so the uniqueness of our request, I guess, is the fact that when they built this originally, they built the house right up on top of the setback. My understanding from when I did this back in 2003 and 2004 was that the building setback requirements changed from the time that this property was built to where they exist today. So it was allowed when the house was built, and then it was changed, and now that's factoring into our need for relief.
Maybe it might be helpful, on what we have as A9, the survey, there is a neighborhood map,
Yep.
and maybe if we could look at that and just point out your neighbors and let us know if they have signed this consent. That might be helpful.
You could probably do it from this.
We can see it.
Yeah, I'll do it from the numbers.
Yeah.
So directly to, if facing our house directly to our left would be 517.
Okay.
They've signed. We have 513, which is a couple houses down, so not directly, but on the cul-de-sac, within the cul-de-sac circle.
Right.
521 is one of the flag lots, and 524 is the other flag lot, so facing my house to the left, the two flag lots they've signed.
Okay.
And then 516 is my neighbor on the other side, facing the house, they would be the neighbor to the right, and they've signed as well.
Okay, so it looks like all the surrounding properties then.
All the
Yeah.
surrounding properties signed, yes.
Thank you.
Would you be able to tell us the difference in square footage between the current section that encroaches into the setback and the proposed new square footage of the encroachment?
So the existing porch, the square footage of encroachment now is 121 square feet, and that's into the front yard. The proposed porch is 391.5 square feet into the front yard. The existing porch projects 4.7 feet into the front yard, and the proposed porch would project 9.25 on one side, but because it's on an arc, the other side is only 3.25. So the east corner projects 3.25. There's a center gable as an accent on the porch, which you'll see on the architecturals. Oh, I'm sorry.
Speaking to the mic.
So there's a center gable on the center of the porch. You'll see that on the architectural plan, which we labeled A10. And that sticks out 10.5 feet into the front yard setback. So there's 3 points I've identified of the intrusion. And as Michael said, I think the previous application called for a wraparound porch, which would have been going, as you stand in the cul-de-sac, wrapping around the left side of the house. But because of grading conditions and just size, we pulled that back, and I recommended we just go straight across.
So to build on what you just said, it could be suggested that the grading condition on the side of the building caused that to be unavailable for purposes of a porch, so that the grade is, if not unique, perhaps a peculiar aspect of the lot, which is causing you to request the variance.
Right, and I think the shape of the building envelope and the fact that the house was built so close to the front yard setback to start with, and the uniqueness of being on the arc of the cul-de-sac, so the setback line isn't dead on, like perpendicular to the face of the house. It's kind of offset and skewed. That's why the one end of the porch projects out more into the front yard than the other. And the existing porch does the same thing. It projects out more on one side than the other. They basically built the garage of the house right on the front setback line, which is present now, the 60-foot. And so everything beyond the 1 foot offset of the house is pretty much like an outlier now and non-conforming.
I have a separate question, and Kevin, this might be for you. The architectural plans, which again are A10?
A10.
Yeah. I don't know the answer to the question. Maybe you do, Kevin. There's discussion. It looks like in addition to the expansion of the porch, there is some work that's being done to change the facade a bit of the structure.
That's correct.
And one of the things that appears to be called for is a trellis
A trellis is attached to the...
that's affixed to the structure.
garage, yes.
But is not supported by posts that are in the ground.
Correct.
It would appear that at least in the air, that's in the setback, but is a trellis affixed that way going to be problematic?
There are provisions for extensions into the yards as contemplated by our code, and I think eaves and overhangs, things like that. I'd have to take a look at the details a little bit more specifically. You know, just looking at the exhibit that they have up there, it's hard to tell where the front of the house meets the front setback line. There could be
Yeah, I think
enough
if you
room
look
in
at
there.
A9, you can extrapolate from that, because that section of the structure appears to be right up against the setback.
I believe it's within 6 inches.
Yeah.
And I believe we're allowed to have a 2-foot overhang with eaves, cornices, and I think
Okay.
fireplaces and chimneys, something like that. So we could keep that trellis within that. It's simply a series of brackets
Right.
that's on the garage wall.
No, I understand. I just don't want there to be a situation where
Oh, sure.
we make a determination,
Oh, yeah.
grant relief, and then all of a sudden you're, hey,
Right.
we need something.
Yes, thank you.
I understand, thanks.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure that a trellis is what is contemplated in that provision of the code. I mean, they're talking about chimneys and gutters and eaves and overhangs typically at the roof line. If this is something that's projecting off the face of the structure and is more ornamental, then I would think that that would need to comply with the building setback. But again, I'd have to take a look at the details a little bit closer.
Yeah, I think the trellis was
I-
just
I-
placed for aesthetic
It
reasons.
is, there's,
Yeah, I understand that it's,
Keep it within the notice, you could make it part of your.
yeah, thank you. I mean, if,
You think the notice is sufficient for these
Well, if you
purposes?
deem it to be sufficient, to include that. If you deem it, if you deem the notice sufficient to include or relief as needed to expand the existing nonconformity.
well, the nonconformity is the porch, it's not the trellis.
Understood.
Bear with us for a second, I want to read the notice again.
no problem, thank you. It's not.
Let's proceed. And I'm not making a determination. I'm not making a determination of whether the notice is sufficient to cover everything that you might need. I just want to see how the rest of the presentation goes.
Sure.
And then we can take it from there. So you've explained why you want to do the porch. Looks lovely, but we're not design review, so you know, we're not experts on lovely. Any questions from the board on the application?
Curious whether there's any other input.
We're gonna get to that. Is there anything else with respect to the application you feel we should consider before opening things up to public comment?
I think the only thing would be, what we're proposing to do is just to improve the aesthetic of the house. Presently, there's like breaks in material. We're trying to kind of disguise that with this roof that projects for the porch. We're adding a large gable. If you look on the architectural, which is A10, we're adding a gable on top of the existing roof, which does not project anywhere close to setbacks. So basically just trying to improve the aesthetic with some quality materials and give Michael and Susan a place to kind of hang out if they choose to. And I think, you know, everything we're showing, I think it enhances their property value, and it doesn't harm any of the neighbors' property values, in our opinion anyway.
Right.
And so I think that's what we were trying to take into account.
I think the fact that I think it enhances the neighborhood, not just our property. I think as reflected in the fact that the neighbors have all signed off on that.
Yeah,
too.
and when you went to your neighbors, did you show them the architectural plan, or
I
what?
I showed them the architectural plan, so they understand the facade changes that are being made, including the trellis that we talked about moments ago. But then I also showed them the plot plan and showed them where the building setback is and the encroachment that we're seeking relief for, so that everybody's completely up to speed on what we're asking for and have signed as a result.
Anything else you think we should consider? Okay,
Unless
great.
you have any other questions.
Any other questions from the board? Is there any member of the public that wishes to speak on this application? Okay, seeing none, typically what will happen now is you would ask that the exhibits that you've provided to us be moved into the record. So would you like to ask us that?
Yes, would it be okay if you moved the records, the items into the record?
Without objection. Okay, thank you. I'd like to entertain a motion on the application to start discussion.
I'd like to make a motion to grant relief from the, to grant a variance from the setback requirements of the code for construction in accordance with the plans presented.
Is there a second? Is there a second?
Second. Second.
Board discussion?
I'm sympathetic. I think if we need to articulate the peculiarity here, it's the topography, the testimony of the topography next to the property. It's significant that all neighbors are in support. I'd like to cover the trestle issue because I think it's de minimis, and it would be shame to have to force the property owner to go through this process a second time for that technicality. So that's why I phrased the motion that way.
The emphasis being as presented in the plan.
So, yeah, I agree. I think that, to me, the uniqueness of this property is where it was built right on that setback line, and you've got an existing porch that already extends into it. I think it's somewhat de minimis, maybe not technically de minimis, but strikes me as de minimis, the relief that you're looking for. So I'll be in support.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I think it certainly helps that all the neighbors are on board. So,
Okay, if there's no further discussion, I'll call the vote. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? There are none. The application is granted in accordance with the motion. Good luck with your project. Thank you.
Thank you for your time, appreciate it. Thank you, everybody.
The next matter, excuse me, is Appeal 3055. The applicant, Maureen Daly, property located at 114 Trianon Lane and zoned R2 density modification. Applicant seeks a variance from Section 280-97B3 of the code to continue the existing nonconformity and reconstruct the deck in the same location. The existing deck does not comply with the zoning code's requirement for rear yard setback. The applicant seeks a variance of the zoning code or such other relief in accordance with the plans and exhibits submitted. Counsel?
Sure. Nick Cornelia, representing the applicant.
Good evening. I'm Maureen Daly.
And you can raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm this testimony you're about to give will be the truth and the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Just briefly, Maureen bought this house toward the end of 2017. Recently, she went to the township to replace her deck, and she found out that the deck was constructed without a permit. And what she is seeking here, basically to verify the deck so that when she goes and sells it, that it would be compliant with code, or at least have zoning relief, and also replace the deck in the same footprint as it currently exists due to its current condition. So that's what we're asking here for this evening. This, if you may remember, I think there was a Edenton Drive.
Right down the street. Right?
Yeah, something happened very recently.
Yeah, I think it was
about a year or two ago.
a pool surround or something.
Yeah, it was something, and it was the same thing, although that one violated impervious coverage. All this violates is the rear yard setback, and in fact, behind Maureen's house is the open space for the Trianon development, and you'll see the aerial is basically all woods back there. So, Maureen, you purchased this property in June of 2017?
Correct.
And A2, that's a copy of the deed?
That is.
And what brings you here this evening?
Well, as you just summarized, when I went to replace the existing deck, it's a deck that's wooden, and when I first moved in, I had it sanded and stained, and it was a pretty laborious job to do that. I noticed that some of the spindles that were attached were different widths, certainly something that a child's head could get through. There's several steps when you come outside of the property that could be a tripping hazard for people. So over the 2 summers that I've been there, I've used the outside quite a bit, and I thought it was worth the investment to get the Azek, I think it is, material so that I can get the wooden deck taken down. So when I went through the estimate process, I was unaware that there was going to be a problem until the contractor came here to pull the permit. Then we found out that there was no permit. So I would like to improve the aesthetics of it and certainly the safety of it, and also prevent, when I go to sell the house, having another buyer aware of the situation, because I would have to disclose this, and to avoid all that hassle, I'd just like to get it cleared up.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as A3 survey performed by Mominy for 114 Trianon. And does this accurately represent your property to the best of your knowledge?
It does.
And the red-lined area, that's your existing home?
It is.
And then the area below it is the existing deck?
It is. There's a brick patio directly outside doors, and then there's a small wooden deck off, depending how you're looking at it, to one side, and there's a octagon-shaped deck to the other side.
And the deck is at its closest point to the rear yard setback, 14.23 feet?
Yes.
And you're intending to replace this deck?
Replace it with the existing footprint.
Okay, so exact same locations currently exist.
Exact same. My understanding is they're going to use the same footers.
And all other setback requirements and impervious coverage requirements and building coverage requirements you meet complies with zoning?
That's my understanding.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as A4. And is this an aerial of this site?
It is.
And out here, looking at the aerial, is Ifan Avenue.
That's right.
And here's Trianon Lane, where your house is located.
Yes.
And the arrow here is indicating where your house is located.
Yes.
And then what is behind you where the deck is located? What is behind the deck?
There's nothing. There's some common space that belongs to the community, and then beyond that is other space, but it's an entirely wooded area.
To show you what's been marked as A5, can you just tell the board what that represents?
That's the front of my home.
And A6?
That is a view of the partial deck area, the brick deck area or the brick patio.
A7?
That is a rear view of my home if you were at the very end of my property looking at the property.
And A8?
That's a similar view of the home if you were standing at the edge of the property looking back at it.
And so that's looking back toward the open space.
Sorry, yeah, that's what I meant. Sorry, it's if you were at the deck area looking out.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, Nick. So on the other edge, on the other side of the open space is South Ifan Avenue and then Agnes Irwin, right?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thanks.
I'm going to show you what I've marked as A9 and A10. These are new exhibits that I'll hand up to the board. First, if you could read into the record, explain to the board what A9 represents, and then I have it backed up with A10.
Okay. This is a letter from the contractor to explain the scope of the project. It's signed by Mark Bankston, B-A-N-K-S-T-O-N. He's the project developer for Stump's Deck and Porch. And the letter reads, "To whom it may concern, we have been contracted to build a deck for Maureen Daly of 114 Trianon Lane. The proposed deck would replace the current deck with the same footprint, and it will not encroach any further into the setback than the current deck. The current deck, built before Ms. Daly purchased the home, was built without a building permit and has substantial structural anesthetic shortcomings. While we
Okay,
don't,
I'm sorry, you don't need to read it into the
Okay,
record.
fine.
We-
I'll just put it in.
Yeah, I'm
Thanks.
sorry, yeah, that'll be entered into the record.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And then A10, if you can tell the board what A10 represents?
this is basically a schematic of how the improvement would look.
And have you spoken to your neighbors?
I have.
And I'm going to show you what I've marked as A11 and A12. And you can tell the board what they represent and who those people are.
Sure. A11 is an email from John Dodge, who is a neighbor and a member of the Homeowners Association Board, to say that he was okay if I was going to improve the area with a different deck. And A12 is a letter from my next door neighbor telling me that she also was in agreement, had no issue with the plan. Certainly. John Dodge is D-O-D-G-E. And on A2, the neighbor is Leslie Dalton, D-A-L-T-O-N.
May I ask a question? Is this work or this improvement required under the governing documents of the Homeowners Association, or is this, I mean, I'm trying to understand the capacity in which Mr. Dodge is writing this
Yeah,
note.
he just.
He's
go ahead.
he's as a neighbor. There's no issue with the HOA.
To the extent either of you know, the A4, which is the photograph that shows the the undeveloped space behind your property, do we think that all the way out to Ithan is owned by the community, or you think a portion of that's owned by the community?
I think it's all owned by the community because I see them improving it.
Okay. Improving, in the
Improving,
sense
pruning.
cutting grass, okay. And is it your best understanding that the community agreement provides that that is to remain not developed by homes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Where's is a large mansion shown on this A4, the mansion site? Or is it just kind of, if you could tell me where is, I don't see it, I'm just curious.
No, I don't see it either. My home is in a cul-de-sac as well, so you come into the community on Chalice, and the mansion would be, if you're looking at it right now, to the right.
This Chalice, is that Trianon up there? Or
Yes,
is that,
it runs, Trianon runs directly behind where the mansion was.
and it's called Trianon Road or Trianon
Trianon
Lane?
Lane.
Okay. So, yeah, there's going to be a development, but it's around the mansion. And it's not disturbing the open space, actually, development would be. So I just wanted to make certain that we're not talking about one of the lots as part of that development. This is, from my familiarity with the site, this is all open space under the density modification provisions of the code.
Yeah. I think, since I live on South Ithan Avenue, not too far from this property, there's a house on the corner of Chalice and South Ithan, and then there's the lot that the mansion used to be on. I think that's the way things step up. That's some ways away from this location.
It is.
That's all I have, just request exhibits from me, part of the record, please.
Any questions from the board? Is there any member of the public who chooses or wishes to speak to this application? Seeing none, we'll enter the exhibits into the record. Entertain a motion on the application, if anyone cares to make one. Your turn, Jamie. Go ahead, Rich.
I would make a motion to grant the variance for purposes of reconstructing the deck in accordance with the plans that we've seen using the existing footprint.
Second?
Second?
Any discussion?
I think we should approve it, particularly in light of the fact that the, behind the parcel is undeveloped land which will not be impinged upon And given the fact that it previously existed and the property owner is innocent to the prior illegal construction, that we should allow for legalization.
If there's no further discussion, I'll call the vote. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? There are none. Your application is granted. Good luck with your project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, appeal number 3056. The applicant, is it Smythe or Smith? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Oh, it's Mike, yeah.
Smythe. Smythe, sorry. I figured you might know, Nick.
Although I did misspell it, I was corrected because I put an E on the end of it at one point, and Mike corrected me.
The applicant, Smythe Family Realty LLC, property located 324 East Lancaster Avenue and zoned C3 Commercial. The applicant seeks a variance from the following sections of the zoning code relating to signs in a commercial district. Section 280-122C7B, sign area and sign height for wall signs. Section 122C7E1A, sign area and sign height for freestanding sign. And Section 280-122C8A, sign area and sign height for directional sign. In the alternative, applicant seeks such other relief consistent with the exhibits and testimony. Counsel?
Thank you, Nick Cornelia, representing the applicant. We have modified this, I think, perhaps to take care of two of the requested variances, and one on the freestanding sign and the other one on the directional / instructional sign. I know Kevin and I went around a little bit about, is this a directional sign, instructional sign, a freestanding sign, or whatever, or what is it? And I'm just thinking the best way to present it logically. Perhaps, if you don't mind, let me go in order and we'll present each sign, and the ones I think that we've made comply now, I'll present, and I guess Kevin can weigh in on whether they comply now or don't comply with the ordinance. That may be the easiest way to do it. Although Kevin's going to be seeing them for the first time, some of them.
Yeah, I don't know that I'm going to be prepared to make a determination looking at something for 5 minutes, so.
Okay. All right.
If it's obvious, then yes, I can.
Yeah,
weigh
I
in.
think some of it may be obvious, so it may be like does a base count? There's a 6-inch base, and if that did not count, on the freestanding sign, we're half a foot over the square footage. We comply with the height now, and we did ask for relief on the height, but now we have made it so that we comply with the height. There is a small base of 6 inches, and if that base is not part of the sign, which I don't think it is, then we comply on the square footage for the freestanding sign as well.
But, Mr. Cornelia, but your notice has requests for all of them, though,
Yeah,
correct?
right now the
So they're all
notice has
covered.
requests for
Perfect.
all of them. But as we pick them off, I'll say what I think that perhaps we comply with.
Yeah, I think the solicitor's point, though, is if you need them, you can still get them under the notice.
Right. Mike? And also, you may recall, we were before you, we had corporate mandated facade changes as well as a corporate mandated addition to the building, which didn't violate the zoning. What we were asking for relief for the board is to stack parking, and this board granted relief to stack parking. So that relief really has nothing to do with what we're requesting here this evening. This is all regarding the signs on the new facade building.
I do. Michael Smythe, S-M-Y-T-H.
And Mike, what is your relationship to the Smythe Family Partnership?
I
Or
am,
Realty, excuse me.
I am the owner.
And you acquired it in 2018?
That is correct.
And as to the automobile dealership that is located at that site, what is your relationship to that?
I am the owner as well.
And how long you've been operating at this site?
Since it's been in its existence back to 2006 in the new building, but roughly 2000 as the property owner.
I'm going to show you what I've marked as A3, which is an aerial view of the property. And if you can just tell the board, this area here, that black line on A3, that's your property, correct?
That is correct.
And if you can tell, if you're looking to the west, what is located to the west of your property?
It would be the strip mall with Anthony's Pizza and a number of retail shops.
And to the east?
The Legion Hall would be the most notable property.
And as you go further down the street, are they all commercial properties?
They are.
Right, and it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 other properties that are all commercial properties.
That is correct.
And then behind those commercial properties, what's located there?
Those would be the apartments or condo units.
Pembroke North condominium?
Correct.
And behind that are the railroad tracks?
The railroad tracks, yes.
Then across the street from you on Lancaster Avenue?
That would be the bank directly across the street.
Bryn Mawr Trust?
That is correct.
And then going further down to the west?
You would ultimately have the CVS building, an office building, and then the CVS building.
And then further down is the Verizon?
Verizon, and then the gas stations, I believe, are the next parcels up.
Okay. Showing you what's been marked as A4, and A4, and we have a larger site plan that we'll introduce with Kevin Dow, the architect. Kevin Dow will get more into the signs and the size of the signs and things of that nature. A4 is just showing a location of the freestanding sign in the front along Lancaster Avenue, and the instructional sign that is along Ironworks Way as you come into the site. And you'll see what that instructional sign looks like and what is designated on that instructional sign. Recently, as a result of corporate mandated requirements, you put a small addition onto the rear of the building?
We did.
And what else did you do as far as corporate mandated requirements?
Well, all of the improvements have been the result of complying with corporate in order to receive the necessary financial compensation to run the dealership.
Is that a requirement to be compliant, corporate compliant?
It is a requirement. So if you do not comply with facility requirements, you do not qualify for any of the dollars which are essential for our business to operate.
And in addition to that, there's a facade change.
That is correct.
As to the dealership, what type of dealership do you run here?
It's the Land Rover Jaguar dealership.
And is there a requirement that you advertise both or have signage for both?
It's a dual franchise, and part of the global initiative was to bring Land Rover and Jaguar together as because they are owned by the same corporate entities, so the dealerships are all pushed to be dual dealerships, Jaguar and Land Rover.
Was there also a corporate mandate regarding signage?
There was a corporate mandate on signage, yes.
Did you totally comply with what they mandated?
We, understanding the township, we did everything we could to battle with the corporate powers to see how far it could be pushed, and that's the reason we've kind of delayed the meeting on the signage part.
And so would you say these are kind of the smallest signs? And
they're the Pattison sign is the mandated company for the signs, and we went with the smallest possible sign package that they authorized. So significantly smaller than what they were proposing, significantly less signage than they were trying to mandate initially.
That's all I have. As I said, Kevin Dow, the architect, will testify as
Great.
to the size of the signs.
Thank you.
Okay, any questions from the board for Mr. Smythe? No.
Thank you.
Kevin Dowell, Dowell.
Kevin, what is your occupation?
Architect.
And how long have you been an architect?
I have been an architect since 1998.
And are you registered Pennsylvania architect?
I am, since 2005.
And are you the project architect for this project?
I'm the owner. I oversee the project, yes.
Okay. And actually, you oversaw the addition, the facade, the signs, everything?
Yes.
All right. Going to show you a couple exhibits that we have marked. And the first exhibit was A5 that you have in your packet. And actually, I'm going to replace that with A5A. And first, if you can tell the board why what are the two differences between A5 and A5A?
A5 was a rendering done by one of our interns months ago. As we were discussing preparation today for the meeting, I made the comment that the trees weren't necessarily done in our office to match the approved civil plan. And so the difference that you're seeing is simply a couple of trees along the south side of the building.
And we say the civil plan, is this the plan that was approved by the township, the land development plan?
Yes.
And it includes a landscaping plan?
Correct.
And this landscaping plan, and what we're showing in A5A actually shows the trees that were part of the approved landscaping plan.
Correct.
And we'll come back to A5A in a second.
And to clarify, it's a architectural intern's interpretation of the trees that are on the site plan, civil plan.
Yeah, so you mentioned the site plan, which again, this is a larger site plan than what we initially showed as A4. And if you could just tell the board what A5B represents. And I don't know if the board really needs to study A5B because it...
A5B is the approved civil site development plan by AEC engineers. And that shows the trees in the front that were added today to exhibit A5A. They're labeled as ZS, and you can see them along the bottom of the drawing here, or the south side of the building.
So, again, going back to the A5A, does that also show the signage on the building as being proposed?
Yes.
And so we have the Jaguar and the Land Rover signs along Lancaster Avenue.
We do. There's also a main line sign in the silver portion of the south elevation that is not visible with that tree, but it will be seen on other exhibits, the two-dimensional elevation.
Is that why the trees weren't in the first one? No.
No, this is because it was done at 2 o'clock today.
And does it also show the sign along Ironworks Way?
Yes, as proposed.
And as to the size of those signs, if you can tell us the size of the signs on the Lancaster Avenue, the Jaguar and the Land Rover sign?
Okay. Those two signs will be 25.19 square feet and 23.78 square feet. The mainline sign that is hidden on this behind the tree is an additional 6.66 square feet.
And that equals 55.63 square feet.
Correct, on Lancaster Ave, yes.
And along Ironworks Way, which I'm going to show you as A6, we see the Jaguar Land Rover sign there.
So that's also visible on A5A. It would be just the two small signs. That is a total of 8.48 square feet, both of them combined. And it's just a small Land Rover and a small Jaguar Leaper.
Was the corporate mandate more signage on on Ironworks Way?
Yeah, at the start of the project, we received a design intent package, and essentially they were looking for the same 3 signs that are shown here on the Lancaster Ave side. They wanted repeated on the Ironworks Way side of the building.
Now, you
Or-
had, on the north side of the building, which is really behind the building.
Yes.
Is there another, there's that main line sign?
Yeah, so we have a little bit of different situation than their prototype. So normally the entrance would be off the front of the building, this look. In this case, we have, you know, a 10-foot hill. And so we have kind of a secondary entrance in the back from the parking lot that customers will come in, and we put the name Main Line again over that, mostly just to draw their attention to where they needed to come into the building along the back.
And
that,
what's the size of that sign?
that would be that same 6.66 square feet.
And although that complies with the height requirement, that
Yes,
sign. It's
yes.
less than 15 feet.
Correct.
So adding those numbers up for wall signs, you come to what total?
70.77.
And the requirement under the code is 60?
60.
And that's for wall signs, the requirement for wall signs, correct?
Correct.
We meet the requirement for sign area of all signs on the site. Is that accurate?
I believe so, yes.
We're not asking for relief for that, for total sign area for the site. I'll say that to the board. We're not asking relief for the total sign area. What we're asking for relief on is the wall signs. The code, the way it reads, and perhaps we should look at it. If I can. The code has different provisions for commercial signs than for automobile signs, automobile dealership signs. There's one provision for commercial signs and another provision for automobile dealership signs. The sign area for both are the same on that. It's based on linear feet. And if you could tell, and it's based on linear feet on each street. And if you could tell the board what the linear footage is on Lancaster and on Ironworks.
We have 125 on Lancaster and 102 linear feet on Ironworks Way.
And the code says you're allowed 2 square feet for each foot of lineal, so we're way under the requirement for total sign area. I'll look at Kevin on that. Make sense?
Sure, without seeing the calculations in front of me,
Yeah.
it sounds about right.
Right. But you would agree that if it was 120 along Lancaster and 100 along Ironworks Way, you add that up, multiply it by 2, and that's your total sign area? Okay. We're not asking for relief from that requirement. Then you go to wall signs, and for automobile dealership, you're only allowed a total wall signs of 60 square feet. That is,
That is
yes,
280, 122.
yeah, the one.
C7?
122, that's C, that's the commercial one. So actually, we're going to, yes, C7, which deals with the automobile dealership.
And there's nothing on the, just to close the circle, there's nothing on the western face of the building.
That's correct.
Thanks.
So, and that's where it talks about the 60 square feet total for wall signs as opposed to permitting 50 square. I believe commercial allows you to have 50 square feet on each street, but because we're not we're under a different requirement here. We're automobile dealership signs, so we're limited to 60 square feet on the total site. And the other issue regarding the wall signs is the height, which is the height requirements you see in 7B also refers to no more than 15 feet.
Correct.
And what are these wall signs at the highest point or what?
The ones that are above 15 feet are the Jaguar and Land Rover signs, and those, the top of them are at 23'8". That's dictated, this is actually how it is dictated to us from Jaguar Land Rover. It fits specifically between, in the second row of panels from the top of the building. That 23'8" is just below one of the horizontal reveals.
Did you get a design review with these?
I did. And when we went to design review, we went without the signage, because it was, I think, last May. And their comments were kind of how plain the building looked basically how plain the building looked. And then I brought out the prototype and pointed out to them that these signs were eventually going up there. And they, their opinion was, paraphrasing, their opinion was that they were necessary to kind of fill in the large expanses of charcoal ACM that occur above the windows on both the east and west sides of what would normally, on the prototype, be the main entrance, which is that silver, the lighter silver band at the middle of the south entrance.
Is there a focal point involved with it too?
Yeah, I think so, because I think, and again, we put the trees in front of it, but if we wanted to go to the 2D exhibit of elevations of the south, which I have here and you've already submitted.
So that A7, Nick?
I believe it's A7.
Yes, it would be A7.
No, it's, which one are you looking at? 3.0, right. A7. This is just a larger, you have A7, just a larger view of it.
So when you say the focal point, the two brands are separated to either side of the showroom. We'll have Jaguar on the west side, Land Rover on the east side. The window is meant to obviously showcase the vehicles from the street, and then the actual signs themselves kind of anchor the top of the building there.
Okay, now, going to the freestanding sign,
Yes.
which is...
Excuse me,
a-
can I ask a question?
Sure.
While we're on the wall signs, and maybe you said this, maybe I just missed it, but the service sign in the back, we're not including that in your totals?
That is, it's, I believe it's, the service sign is permitted. Yeah, I think it's permitted
And that was not included in any of those calculations I gave you.
in the wall signs category. Right, yeah, we comply with that, so we're not asking for relief on it. $70.77. And 60 is what the code says. As to the freestanding sign in the front, I have marked, we have it as A9, correct? This is which was submitted, which showed the freestanding sign is 37.35 square feet and a height of 10 feet 9 7/8 inches. We have replaced that with what we think may comply. Right now, what we have down, you'll see it says the square footage is 30.5, but it includes a small base. I'll show Kevin it too. But it does comply with the height requirement that is under 10. So I've marked it as A9A. That really
You want me to describe the change?
sorry. As you can tell, this was done.
Yeah, essentially what you're looking at is one on the left of the screen is what Jaguar Land Rover proposed. It has a 10-foot 9 height and an overall square footage of 37 feet. They had been resistant to change until today when we told them we were appearing in front of you again, and this is another change that occurred today. We requested that, I don't know if the horizontal lines are real clear on the screen there, but below the two logos, there's actually 3 separate panels. Each one is 1'11" high by 3'5" wide. We asked if we could take out one of those panels. We kind of believe it gives the same look, and they agreed to it, got this over to us. And as Nick started to mention, they have a square footage of 30.5, but that does include the 6-inch base. So if we were to say 6 inches times 3.5 feet, we are actually technically under 30 square feet for the sign without the base.
Just out of curiosity, since you've had a couple conversations, presumably, with the manufacturer, what's their reaction if we say no?
We would probably have to take the verdict back to them and show them that.
One of the problems has been, as we have met with resistance, they have come back and said, we'll hold your business builder payments, which is a large portion of, regardless of whether it's a township, requirement, they're like, hey, if this has been approved in, township X, it becomes the precedent that has been set. So what we've tried to do is take a softer, gentler approach, and some of the gains that we've really pulled together, we think are a much better situation for the township. So when you look at the Ironworks Way side, previously you had a lot of signage in an area that was exposed to what we might consider to be residential. I've now scooched all of that up to the corner of the building closest to Lancaster Avenue, which I think is a significant gain and, much better. And in terms of the signage around the building, I've certainly gone up Midtown and behind and looked every conceivable angle to see what the impact is, and there really isn't an impact. I think there's an improvement, but by code, we need your help. But that's what we're, challenged with. But
Thank you.
I did speak to Kevin. I'm sorry, Bill. On A9A, that little base, and he believes that is a supportive issue, and Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong, which would not be calculated in the sign area. And if that's not calculated in the sign area, then we do not need relief on this sign.
Kevin, when does it stop being a base?
When it's, I guess, integral to the design of the sign, there's a definition for sign area, and it talks about the area of all lettering, wording, and accompanying designs and symbols, together with the background on which they are displayed, but excluding any supporting framework and bracing, which are solely incidental to the display itself. From the rendering, it looks like that is, it's sunken in. It's not part of, if it was one continuous vertical dimension, it steps in a little bit. To me, that is supportive framework to that.
Nick, just help me with where A9A and A10 are proposed to be installed on the site.
I have it. Here it is. Kevin? Oh, it's on A4, I believe, actually.
So A4 is...
Looking at A4, go ahead, Kevin.
Okay. So A9A is the sign kind of towards the center of the south of the showroom along Lancaster Ave. referring to the other one, or is that now compliant?
We're going to call, no, we're not, we're going to refer to that in a second.
Okay. The other sign that is going to be referred to next, which is the directional sign, is up here along Ironworks Way, near where the curb cut is into the property parking lot.
May I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Are any of the signs illuminated that you're proposing?
The wall signs are, yes.
The wall signs on the
Yeah.
front of the building facing Lancaster?
Yeah,
And are they considered wall, not directional? Confirming.
correct. And actually, the pylon is also internally illuminated. The pylon, or monument sign, Exhibit A9A is internally illuminated where the letters are. So it's a dark ACM to match the building, and then the logos there are illuminated.
So is your position now that A9A with the change in dimension does not require variance?
Correct. So I can,
And what about A10A? which-
that's where we're going to go.
Fine.
Yeah. And on A10A, you see that in front of you, but let's just describe it first, Kevin, if you mind, what A10A represents and the height and the size of it. And yeah, I think you already referred to where it would be located.
Okay. So again, yeah, it's on the east side of the building as you're coming onto the property off of Ironworks Way. This sign is not illuminated. It is just meant to be, under normal prototype, there is much more parking, shows, how you get to the showroom, how you get to service, and that's what's being proposed here, is simply a guide to any new customer coming onto the lot.
And and this is where we're going to have to go into definitions a little bit. If you look at 280-118, and the two definitions I'm going to point to, actually, in particular, are the one for directional sign and the one for instructional sign, which defines each. I'll read them. Directional sign. A sign designated points of ingress and egress to a property, normally located at such points of ingress and egress. So that appears to me to mean that you're telling the people how to go out or how to enter the site. Instructional sign says a sign located with the interior of a lot, generally not visible from the street or adjoining property, which provides information as to location, interior operation, and or use of building or facilities, which this appears to be more of an instructional sign. And the difference is there's different requirements for each under C. If it's a directional sign, it can be no more than 3 feet high and not exceed 4 square feet, which kind of makes sense. You're looking at a ground sign that's telling you, go this way to go out, go this way to come in. Instructional signs, sign shall not exceed 30 square feet in sign area or sign height 6 feet above existing grade. And actually, this is one of the signs that we reduced today as well, because if you look at regular A10, this was taller and larger, and we reduced it down to be even lower than what is required for an instructional sign. And we're not even considering it, but Kevin and I went around, is this an additional freestanding sign which we would be permitted to have? And I think we can get away from that even, and if it's an instructional sign. And Kevin, why don't you describe as to why it's an instructional sign and also as to the square footage and height?
Okay, so as to the height, we did get it reduced today. So on the Exhibit A4, it was listed as 6'11" tall. This was another.
A10, I believe on A10 it was listed. Yeah,
A10,
there it
sorry.
is.
Well, no, it's also listed on
Okay,
here
right.
as the previous. So again, this is something where they finally softened up today, and we requested that it be lower. Frankly, you come at it from not a great distance off of Ironworks Way, so we didn't want it to be that high. And we got it down to, it's a 4'8" silver ACM sign, so that matches the lighter color at the entrances of the building. And then it again also has a base, it's saying 100 millimeters, that's, 4 or 6 inches. And it would be instructional, again, it's not, it's blank on the, when you're on the property, on the back side of it, you're just gonna see a silver monument, and it's simply giving you instructions on where to go depending on what service you're looking for when you come into the property versus exit or entrance.
If I was in the market for a new Jaguar, and I drove my car along Ironworks Way, how do I get into the property? And is there a sign right there where
Well,
when I
that's,
get into the property?
that is this sign. So, and then obviously,
But that might be considered a point of ingress?
yeah.
And I suppose egress as well, but there's nothing on the back of that sign saying
Correct.
Lancaster Avenue. Yeah, okay. And would you consider that to be the interior of the lot? Where that sign is located? If one were to suggest that while it's not a major thoroughfare, Ironworks Way is one road and Lancaster Avenue is the other, is that sign in the interior of the lot that is circumscribed by those two roads?
Can you repeat that again?
Is the sign, the smaller sign we're talking about that faces Ironworks Way, is that located in the interior of the lot that is bordered by Ironworks Way on the east and Lancaster Avenue on the south?
I would say so. It falls within the edge of the curb line on the customer parking to the south of it, which would be this line right here.
I'm just trying to get some understanding to properly apply the definitions that we're talking about.
What would you consider the definition of the interior of the property?
We'll get to that.
Yeah, I guess he asked the questions, we answer.
Stay tuned.
You had briefly mentioned, Nick, discussion of whether this was secondary sign.
Correct.
And, from reading the ordinance, it appears that you're entitled to that.
Right.
Because you sell 2 different makes of automobiles.
Right.
Is there a reason why you're not using that?
Now, we had discussed that as well, and that was my next comment here, is that we are allowed a secondary sign, which just would comply with both the height and the size, if it is considered a secondary sign. And we're back to definitions again as to, is a directional sign, is it an instructional sign, or can it just be considered a secondary ground sign? Yeah, and see if we have ground sign, a sign designed to be viewed at eye level or below within the immediate vicinity, which is intended to be designed and viewed as an architecturally unified and proportional element. Ground sign shall be constructed so that the maximum height from mean grade to the lowest area of the sign face not exceed 4 feet. That's a ground sign. But then the freestanding sign is under the automobile dealership. That was just the definition. Then under
Yeah, I think
dealership
you have
and
a
commercial,
specific
it's bigger.
definition
Yeah.
here. Yeah.
Yeah. So it really doesn't define what a ground sign is outside of saying it's a sign on the ground. So that's the, I hate to come back to this, but, you know, our code, or the Radnor code, I should say, sometimes is a little ambiguous. The solicitor
That keeps
accused-
us in business, Nick.
Yes, well, the township solicitor accused me of that being my favorite argument, so.
I have a question. Can you address the height? You're looking for a variance for the height with respect to the wall signs, correct?
Correct.
Can you address that a little bit? The hardship there, is the property elevated? What's the condition there for 23 feet?
Yeah, sure, Greg, you answer and then I'll.
Okay, so the first item is that is simply what the franchise is looking for. You know, again, they're very rigid. Secondly, part of showing the trees on the resubmitted rendering is that actually allows you to see the signs above the trees that.
Yeah, that's
were
kind of what I was
put
getting
on
at.
them.
So if you were to set them at 15 feet,
I don't think, it would be like my mainline sign that
Would you
I'm
be
just asking you to trust is there.
yeah, so the question is, do you think you'd be able to see it from street level if those signs were set at 15 feet?
I don't think I would.
Were the trees a requirement of township development approval?
They were a requirement of the land development, and they were approved as part of the land development package. And that's why we submitted that A5B that shows A5A shows the trees, A5B shows the approved land development plan indicating the location and species of the trees.
So Kevin's answer could be taken as being responsive on the hardship question as to height. What about size?
And the size is, we have two dealerships that we need to, from a corporate standpoint, from any standpoint, that we need to advertise.
Well, building on this, these are the smallest signs that they currently offer without figuring out a way to do them custom. This also came up at the Architectural Review Committee, because when they were saying how plain it looked, I had, you know, and again, I'm paraphrasing, they said they would almost like to see it bigger so it fills up the space. And we laughed because I said, well, you know, even the smallest signs are going to require a variance. But that's why, you know, this is the smallest that Pattison, the smallest sign package that Pattison offers.
It's not
But
a,
it- but it
that's not a
is-
traditional definition of hardship
Yeah,
under Pennsylvania
but it
law.
is, considering the fact that we have a dual dealership here, I think that has to weigh into it as well, in addition to the building features itself. So even more so than the corporate mandate, and I understand that it's more of the building itself, as well as the use of the building.
And the directional or instructional signs, whatever they might be, or it might be, that is also a requirement from the home office?
That is,
No, well, you know, that's,
well, and I keep looking back because quite honestly, we don't care about that sign. We're being forced.
Yeah. Let me, it gives us tremendous ammunition to fight the fight we'd like to fight. If the wall signs are granted and we can move forward there, and if there is some resistance on the freestanding sign, which I think is too large, quite frankly, and
The instructional sign.
the instructional signage, having the desire to reduce that and to make it smaller would not be something that I think would be devastating to us, or, you know, we might have to come back in, but again, I'm not a big believer that that's of paramount importance. I think getting the wall signs approved is really critical to what we want to accomplish, and we're willing to fight that fight with corporate.
So,
I can't withdraw that.
yeah.
Yeah, that's what it comes down to. I can't withdraw that request.
So for this part of your request, I guess if it is an instructional sign, you're okay. If it's a secondary ground sign, you're okay. If it's a directional sign, you're not okay.
Correct.
So for this piece of it, I guess you have to request from us, I guess, what you're asking for?
Yeah, I
That'd
would
be determined as a...
I would request that it be an instructional sign or a secondary ground sign. If the board deemed, I would request that the board consider it either an instructional sign or a secondary ground sign.
So we'd be asked to rule that the zoning ordinance does not apply to this situation.
Yeah, correct. My understanding what his request would be is that you consider it or deem it to be either an instructional sign or a secondary sign.
Okay, all right.
Mr. Chairman, if I could weigh in on what kind of sign it is. I don't
Sure,
believe
please.
it's a directional sign, because directional sign is very clear as to points of egress, and this does not designate a point of egress. The secondary freestanding sign would not apply. There's a provision under C2, sign content, sign shall contain only the name of the permitted use, business logo, address, and/or telephone number. Again, this sign does not contain any of that information. So it really leads me to, as an instructional sign, it meets the general description of what an instructional sign is supposed to do, except for the location. I would have an issue that this is not interior to the lot. It's right adjacent to the right-of-way. It would have to be interior to a lot, behind the building setback, behind a building facade, the plane of the facade, for me to consider that an instructional sign. Otherwise, I would think that they would need relief on the instructional sign provisions to be located out along the roadway.
What
What kind of
was the
sign?
provision?
Thank you, thank you.
I'm
It's a
sorry,
sign.
on the instructional sign, what's the provision you were just mentioning regarding along the setback or property line?
The chairman mentioned it earlier, a sign located within the interior of a lot. And this
I'm
is,
sorry, what section is that?
28118, it's definition section.
All right, so does that apply to us since we're an automobile dealership?
I don't see any provisions under the automobile use that would negate that.
28118.
See, I guess this is the problem, you know, it has to be something.
Well, and interior is not defined, correct? There's no definition that tells us what the interior of a lot is, correct? We have to make.
There's interior signs definition, but they don't, it just talks about interior of the lot.
Well, I haven't even gotten to the not visible from the street portion of that definition, so hang on.
So I guess we're asking for possibly 3 areas of relief, or 2 areas of relief and 1 area of interpretation. And I guess the interpretation would be that we disagree with the zoning officers on the instructional / directional / freestanding sign interpretation, that it doesn't fit any of those 3. It has to fit one of them, and we would say the least restrictive alternative is that it be considered an instructional sign. I think you understand, and we've already mentioned the sign height of the wall signs and the sign area for the wall signs. So they would be the 2 other variances that we would be requesting. Okay, sure. It'd be the sign height and the sign area of the wall signs would be the 2 other requests for relief.
So Nick, I agree that it's a sign. Ultimately, you as the applicant need to determine what it meets and which sign it is. And as I outlined earlier, it violates the provisions of each one of those. So it is a sign that, as proposed, is non-conforming with the code.
Yeah, I don't know how, again, I would make the ambiguity argument if it's a sign and has to fit within one of these provisions of the
Well,
code.
I mean, the notice itself suggests that it's a directional sign, in as much as the language of the notice uses the term directional sign. So in the first instance, that's the first thing we're being asked to consider. There's the catch-all in the alternative. We understand that. But when we get to deciding the various items, the first question we are going to answer is whether we consider that to be a directional sign, because that's the notice, and that unless you're withdrawing that, and I think we understand where we
Yeah.
are with that one.
Right.
You're
I
not
was-
withdrawing it, so we're going to have to answer that, and we will.
Yeah, I would withdraw that because I believe that it's an instructional sign, and we would consider it to be either an instructional sign or a secondary ground sign. So that would be, if I had to amend this, and again, it is in here that other relief consistent with the exhibits and testimony, and it would be that this sign that is being proposed is either an instructional sign or a directional sign which complies with both the height and the size requirements of the code.
Can you take a look at 280, 122, C7, C1?
Is it a commercial district?
C7, number and type.
7 relates to automobile.
Got it.
Yeah.
Right, freestanding signs,
Primary ground sign, yeah.
right, number and type, and then A. It's the second sentence that I'm looking at. Is that
That's for the
applicable?
primary ground sign. And then it says secondary, so B would be the one, yeah. I'm sorry, Rich.
Well,
would it be?
It's,
The
doesn't
first
it,
one is
doesn't it
primary.
permit one sign on each street
Right.
frontage?
And that's the secondary ground sign, that's what we were saying.
Oh, I
Under B,
understand.
a second ground sign shall be permitted. And we do have using pre-owned automobiles on
That's a
this site.
period, then.
And that's why I would say it's either a secondary
Right, A
ground
has
sign
one
or it's an instructional sign.
But you fail to meet the provisions of subsection 2 on sign content.
Yes.
Do we consider this to have more than one street frontage, knowing we have Ironworks on one side and Lancaster on the other?
Yes, I believe that we've considered it as two
So we-
streets, yeah.
So if we consider that, and go back to what Richard mentioned, that it shows that we would have two signs, because we have two streets for frontage, would it not fall under primary ground sign and not secondary? Because we could say second sign, but not secondary.
So you have a second ground sign, but not a, quote, secondary ground sign.
You could argue that there could be two signs on each frontage, a primary and a secondary, and that hasn't been raised and hasn't been requested. I say that it fails to meet the provisions of this section because of sign content subsection 2. It does not only, it provides information other than what is permitted on a ground sign in this district for this use. So it fails to meet the requirements of a ground sign, whether it's primary or secondary, because of subsection 2 in that provision.
So you're saying if they wanted to install a second sign, just like the one that's on Lancaster Avenue, with the Land Rover and Jaguar logos, just a second one like that, otherwise complying with what it had complied with, the content of that sign would satisfy the requirement that you're discussing.
Correct.
Is the content that is shown on A10A the actual intended content, or is that merely shown to be illustrative?
I believe it's the intended, but
That is the intended, because the parking along the Ironworks Way is mostly inventory.
To sort of beat the issue, if you received relief as to content per the exhibit on A10A, I want to confirm you're not backing yourself into a problem where somebody says, we don't want it to say parking reception services and parts, we need it to say instead, or in addition, some other word, because if it's narrow, you're not going to get that some other word.
you okay? Yeah, this is what it's going to say.
Any other questions from the board? Is there anything else
That's all, just request the exhibits be made part of the record, please.
without objection? Are there any members of the public who wish to be heard on this application? Seeing none, can we get, well, let's take, since I believe we've got 3 requests in front of us, why don't we take them in order? And let's, I would appreciate a motion on the relief with respect to the wall sign.
I would move that relief be granted to allow for the wall signs to include the sign area, consolidated sign area as indicated in the proposed plan, and the sign height as indicated in the proposed plan.
Get a second? Second. Board discussion?
I find myself sympathetic to the application because I think the renovation of the property is being done in a way that it's an asset to the township. I think that we need to be cognizant of the challenges faced by retail generally, and this is a type of retail which has the potential to continue long-term in this market, and I'm convinced that these are modest variances which will allow for the successful operation of a desirable business.
I agree with that analysis. I think it does add value to that property and to the township indirectly, and it's, you know, you could argue it's de minimis, maybe not, but it's not significant difference from what the ordinance requires.
I'll say I support the motion of what we're talking about. I'm appreciative that you meet the land development requirements. I don't think these signs are ugly. I don't think they're a problem for the neighborhood. I think they're minimal compared to what some car dealerships look like in our area. And I understand the need to comply with corporate.
I don't have anything to add to the observations of my colleagues. Calling the vote. If all in favor of the motion to grant the relief as described with respect to the wall signs, please indicate by saying aye.
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 All opposed? None? Step 1 is taken care of. The second request is for a variance from 280-122C7C1A, sign area and sign height for freestanding sign. As A9A has been modified and proposed to us, that this is the sign that is the subject of the relief requested. I'd appreciate a motion.
I'm not sure I agree. Yeah, 8, 9A, I understand to have been changed, so it doesn't require relief.
I think we need to make that determination.
Oh,
Don't
that's
we?
right, we're taking out the base, right?
Yeah, I think we simply need to make the determination that the base is not to be, I'm sorry, not to make the motion and put my thumb on the scale, but I think we need to formally, for the record, determine that the base doesn't count and the sign is okay. That having been said, would anybody like to make a motion that the base is not counted and the sign is okay?
Do we have to be that specific, or can we just make a motion that A9A is permitted under the zoning code?
You want to make that motion?
Yes.
I'm happy to entertain that motion.
Yes.
Second.
Any discussion? No board discussion. All in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? No? Okay, that's two. And the third request is for relief from Section 280-122C8A, sign area and sign height for directional sign. I'd be interested to hear a motion on that request.
I would, my motion is predicated upon the language in the advertisement, other relief consistent with exhibits and testimony, and I would make a motion that a variance as to sign content be granted to the secondary ground sign proposed on A10A, such that the content as shown on A10A be permitted.
I'll second that motion.
Board discussion?
I think that's exactly the approach we need here, because that's where the variance is needed. It's from the language on the sign. That seems to be the only thing holding us up in granting relief as a secondary ground sign, because I think it satisfies all the other requirements.
Yeah, and I would just add, it takes away any need to debate, is it a directional, is it an instructional, or what kind of sign is it? It's a sign, and it's the content that's the issue. So I agree.
I agree.
Hearing no other discussion, all in favor of the
I'm sorry, so your
Hearing
motion
some-
includes that what's actually going to be on the sign is what they have proposed: parking, reception, service, and parts.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's why I tried to
Okay. Right.
clarify that.
All right. Got it.
As clarified, I'll call a vote on the motion. All members in favor of the motion as proposed with respect to the last item, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? None? Thank you. Good luck.
Good luck, guys.
Thanks for your patience.
Sure. Thanks.
And we're going to take a 5-minute break. Speaking of patience, we're going to take a 5-minute break and be right back. Sorry.
That was, if I heard one more sentence about signs and content, I was right. Well, I think that was a great way to deal with it. I think that was a great way to deal with it. I didn't sign up for this.
Insomnia.
That could be it, yeah, Insomnia Cookies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right on.
And then that
across-
flower,
No, that's interior sign. The issue here was the interior, within the interior plan. A sign located within the interior, this is construction. This is the interior of any building or stadium. What's the interior? Well, interior of building or stadium is bigger, it's within the wall. It's inside. What's the interior? Right, I think you make a ball.
I'm sorry. I think I'm saving time and then I'm making I'll get better. It's been a minute. I'm not like quite in a year yet.
Why don't we go back on the record and finish up the agenda with the consideration of appeal number 3057, and I'm going to mispronounce a name, and I apologize in advance. The applicant Rosemary and Todd Diwali, thank you. Property located at 403 Barclay Road and zoned R1 residential. The applicant seeks a variance from section 280-15C of the code to construct an addition in the front yard setback. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you. I do. It's Rosemary Diwali. Okay. Okay. Thanks. Thank you for hearing our case. So my husband and I have lived at 403 Barclay since July of 2017. And as you mentioned, we're going to be building an addition to the side of the home. And when we designed the addition, there's a small piece of that addition that's falling beyond the setback in the front yard. And so I brought this here. Now, this is something that our architect had done for us in the last 2 days, so you don't have this. You have some rendering of it, I think, in the application, but this is a lot more precise. So if I
I'm
can
sorry,
just-
do you have at least one copy that we can include for the record?
I do. I have 3, actually. Yeah. So I just wanted to show. Yes,
Could
yes.
we get that?
Yeah, of course.
And why don't we do a little housekeeping here before we get too far into it?
Okay.
The application package is stapled together and has various subject matter itself, the body of the application will be A1. The deed for the property will be A2. Next item, I believe, is going to be replaced by what we just handed up. This.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, all right. The large plan that was just handed up, which is a survey, I'm sorry, a survey of the subject property prepared by Bieber, B-I-E-B-E-R Land Surveying Company, LLC, will be A3. Got that, George? Sorry. And there is also a set of 4 photographs, presumably of the subject property, which we will identify as A4. Four? Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, I think we better. We're going to individually identify these photographs. The photograph at the top of the page that has the heading of the property address, 403 Barclay Road, will be A4A. The second bottommost photograph on that page will be A4B. On the next page, there are similarly 2 photographs, the top one of which will be identified as A4C. And the final photograph at the bottom of the second page will be A4D. All right. Thank you for accommodating that bit of housekeeping. Now, please return to where you were going.
Thank you. Can you hear me? So I wanted to show on the plan drawing, this right here is the proposed addition. So this rectangular piece right here. And we are confined on our property because we have a stream. Oh, sure. We have a stream that runs through our property. So we have the riparian buffer right here that you can see this line. And then we have the front yard setback right here. So we're really confined here in where we build this addition. And so when we did our design, we found that this piece right here, this triangular piece, which equates to about 25 square feet, is over the setback. And so if you look at the, I guess the deepest part of this triangular piece is 3 foot 9.5 inches. And so that's the furthest it goes out over the setback. And then it's less as you go in here. So what we're requesting is a 5-foot variance. This isn't our final drawings. We're going to be doing that in the next week or 2. So we were hoping that we could have just a little leeway from that 3 foot 9.5 that's in this plan and ask for 5 foot if it was allowable to the board to be able to build this addition to the specifications that we wanted.
And you're requesting relief only from the front yard setback, correct?
Yeah, it only affects the front yard setback.
So you'll understand, because, correct me if I'm wrong, it looks like the riparian buffer line, you're right on that as well, correct?
The riparian buffer is right here, so we're going to build to be right within that.
Okay, so just so you understand, based on your request, it'll be only relief for that front?
Yes, and that's all we're requesting.
So if you were adjusting it to take advantage of that difference between the 3.9 and the 5 feet, give me a sense of where on that diagram it would extend out.
So, I mean, truth be told, it could end up exactly the way that we have it here. I'm asking for 5 only insofar as when we actually finalize the plans, we have a little extra room. But truthfully, this is probably very close to where we'll end. Maybe, a couple inches more. 4 foot is probably all we need.
So it would go to to the northwest on that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it would basically just kind of come this way.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
yes.
I'm sorry.
I don't
No,
know.
yeah, well, I was looking for the arrow that pointed me north, and I found it. So, closer, in the direction of,
The street, yeah.
yeah. Well, there could both be in the direction of the street, depending on how you look at it.
Mm.
We'll figure out how to say that. So is that, there is a stream, is that an active waterway?
It is.
It is, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And just out of curiosity, and just because we have to ask,
Yeah.
any consideration given to a smaller addition?
Yes, I mean, we have played with this plan several times. You know, we live on a street, I don't know if you're familiar with Barclay, but, you know, there's a lot of very large houses there. We're not trying to compete with them, but we want our house to have the value. And so when we're looking at the components of what will be in that addition, we would shortchange it if we reduce it, even those small feet. Because if we try to go within this guideline, we're going to lose 150 feet if we go straight across. It's not
And what's
just
the
that.
square footage of the improvement, or the addition?
So if we did this with the 5 feet, it would be 750 square feet. If we couldn't do it, and you have to do it within these boundaries, it would be 600 square feet.
Extra 5 feet gets you about an extra 100 square feet.
It does, yeah.
And do you have any guess how much of that 100 square feet is beyond the setback?
It's only 25.
No, it's 25 now.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry.
100 square feet.
So I got,
You're right.
I'm trying to anticipate,
Mhm.
if we decide to grant relief, how we phrase it in a way to give you the flexibility without being so open-ended that.
I see. Yeah.
So that's what I'm.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, typically, we would, in most typical case, we would point directly to the
Yes.
plans and say, as shown on
Yeah.
the plan, but
And
that's not what.
we can work with it. I mean, if this is what it is, I think that we can definitely work with it. I was asking just in case, you know, just in case when the architect finished it up, it ended up being slightly more. I wouldn't want, you know, we'd have to probably make adjustments. But honestly, we could probably make it work to this. I understand your question. The 25 feet is assuming just that 3 foot 9.5. If you do go out a little bit more, yeah, so you're right, it is going to be more than that, and I don't know the calculation for that.
Do you have the photographs available to you?
I do, right here.
So I believe it was marked A4A.
Okay.
So the addition you're proposing is to the left,
It is.
On
It's
that-
to the side of this this part of the house, right here.
and the home is single-story,
It is.
and you're going to do a single-story addition?
We like to keep it a ranch. Yeah.
Any other questions from the board? This is typically where I would ask whether you wanted to move your exhibits into the record
Yes, may I move the exhibits?
without objection.
Yes, thank you.
Are there any members of the public who wish to be heard? The most patient woman in the building will now be heard. You have to come up. Yes, and be sworn. I mean, in for a penny, in for a pound. Come on.
Moral support. She has moral support.
Okay, if you'll raise your right hand, do you solemnly swear or affirm this testimony testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And spelling name, please.
Kimberly, and the last name's Tableman, Tableman.
Good evening. What would you like us to think about?
I'm here for moral support. I think it's a great plan, and you did a great job presenting.
And are you a neighbor or?
She's a friend of mine.
Oh, okay.
And I live about a mile away. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Did you have any conversations with any of your more immediate neighbors
We
about this
did.
at all?
We did.
Tell us
I
about
don't
that.
have attestation, but we talked to them.
Tell us what you did and who you spoke to.
They knew we were having the renovation, so when this, when we were doing the hearing, we went and talked to them personally, talked to them about what we were doing, talked about the variance, and they fully supportive and no problem with it.
And not to get too process-driven here, but in conjunction with the filing of the application, you had an obligation to notify a certain list of neighbors as to your plans, and you complied with that.
We did, 100, I think it was 100 of them that we sent out. Mhm.
Any other questions from the board? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Would anyone like to make a motion with respect to the request for relief?
With regard to the scope, I know there would just, depending on how the board's inclined to go, I would suggest perhaps maximizing the square footage that was presented as the maximum square footage, and also the encroachment into the setback not to exceed that, the 5 feet that she's asking for. And I believe 750 was the maximum you thought it would be?
For the addition.
If you got the extra 5 feet, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Just as a suggestion for the motion.
Yeah, so I'll make a motion to grant relief, the relief requested, subject to a maximum setback encroachment of 5 feet and a total square footage on the addition of 750 square feet? Yes.
Second motion?
Okay.
Board discussion, and I'm just doing a little quick math based on this because I think we have a math problem here.
Oh, okay.
Pending resolution of the math problem, it strikes me as being de minimis, even with the potential slight extension, again, pending math resolution.
The encroachment at its maximum point, I believe the testimony was 3 feet 9 inches.
3 feet 9.5 inches, yes.
So it will still be 30 feet wide. It will be 24, 25, I'm sorry. I just want to make sure we don't.
30 by 25 would be the 750.
30 by 25.
Would be the
Let's
750.
just say that the maximum dimensions
Okay.
of the addition will be 30. I'm sorry, Norma. The maximum dimensions of the addition will be 30 feet by 25 feet.
Could amend my proposal as such.
Amending the motion.
Yes.
Second on the amendment.
I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion on the amended motion?
I agree with Bill. I think it's a rather de minimis request on a variance, and I'll be in support of it.
Yeah, I mean, my preference, if you were going for a variance, you went in the correct direction because, variances from riparian buffers, I mean, again, there doesn't appear to be any objection to the proposal, but I consider those a little differently, but from a dimensional So I'm in favor. Let's call the vote. All in favor of the amended motion to grant the relief, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? No one? Thanks for coming out. Thank you
Thank
for your
you.
patience.
Thanks,
Good luck with
everybody.
your
Thank you.
project.
Thank you.
And we are adjourned until March.